They took me to a concert in New York the same night I signed the papers. A gift, they called it. A celebration. Music, city lights, a warm hand at my back as if to say, "You've done enough, Wade. Rest now." I stood there under the marquee, tuxedos streaming by like black water. And I told myself this was what a father wanted. A son grinning at his wife, a future secured, a legacy passed cleanly from hand to steadier hands. My name is Wade Callahan, 61, veteran, farmer. I have known deserts that cut your lips and winters that make a stubborn man kneel. The farm taught me both. The army taught me the rest. How to breathe when the air is thin. How to keep walking when the map lies to you. How to be quiet when noise would only waste strength. Tonight I was trying to be a father, which is different from being a soldier. Harder some days. We signed in the lawyer's office that afternoon. Ethan kept tapping the pen like a drummer too eager for the song to start. Melissa watched the clock. The deed slid across the table with that soft paper sigh that means nothing and everything. I initialed where Samuel, my friend and attorney, pointed. He met my eyes once, steady as fence posts, and I heard what he didn't say. "You sure?" I nodded. There are times a man has to open his hand if he wants what's in it to live. "Dad," Ethan said, clapping my shoulder as if we had just hauled in a good harvest. "This is going to give you your life back." His smile was big enough to hide inside. I tried not to notice how it didn't reach the part of him that used to look at me like I was the horizon and not a fence to get around. Melissa kissed my cheek. "You'll love the surprise tonight," she said. "You deserve a little civilization after all that." Dirt. She meant it as a joke. City folks love their jokes about soil, the way some people joke at a funeral to keep from crying. I gave her that much grace. The concert hall smelled of velvet and perfume and polished brass. We had seats near the stage. When the strings lifted, the whole room rose with them, as if breath itself were being tuned. I watched Ethan watch Melissa, her profile lit in gold by the sconces. They whispered, a private weather between them. I remembered him at 5, running in from the barn with straw in his hair, and the kind of joy that didn't need permission. I remembered him at 17, standing too tall and saying he was a man. The truth is, we only ever grow into our promises or our excuses. It takes time to tell which. During intermission, Melissa kept my hand in both of hers. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Light," I said. It was true. I felt lighter without the deed in my pocket, like a pack finally set down. But there's a difference between light and empty. Ethan bought champagne. He toasted quiet so the ushers wouldn't scold. "To Dad," he said, "who built something we can carry forward." "Carry it steady," I said, and our glasses touched. A clean, bright sound. Somewhere, a door inside me closed gently. I couldn't tell you which room it was, only that the house felt different after. The second half swelled and broke and swelled again, the kind of music that makes you think of mountains and vows. I kept my eyes on the stage, but I could feel them trading glances over me the way hawks talk to each other across a field, short and sharp. When it was over, we walked out into the night. Snow sifted in the lamplight like dust shaken from an old book. Melissa slipped her arm through mine, guiding me toward the curb as if I couldn't find it on my own. "You did a brave thing today," she said. "Letting go." "I prefer to call it setting things in order," I answered. The words left my mouth simple and square. She smiled the way people smile at a stranger who has said something quaint. Ethan pulled up the collar of his coat. "We should beat the traffic," he said. "There's a faster way out if we take the river road." He glanced at Melissa, and she nodded, quick and bright, as if the evening still had one more surprise tucked under its sleeve. I looked back at the glowing marquee, the crowd spilling laughter into the dark, and then at my son, his face lit by passing headlights, handsome and hard to read. The city breathed around us, warm and cold at once. "All right," I said, and opened the car door. "Let's take your shortcut." Snow drifted across the windshield like smoke, soft and endless. Ethan leaned forward, squinting through the blur of white. "The highway's jammed," he said. "River road's faster." Melissa nodded from the passenger seat. "Shortcut," she murmured. "Trust us, Wade." I sat in the back, coat folded neatly on my lap, boots damp from the slush. The heater hummed low. The city lights behind us had already vanished. I could smell the cold seeping in around the door seals, the sharp, metallic scent that tells you the world outside doesn't care whether you breathe or not. Shortcut, huh? I said, my voice steady. Funny thing about shortcuts. They always leave out what matters. Ethan chuckled without looking at me. Melissa smiled at her reflection in the window. The road narrowed, trees closing in like walls. Tire tracks disappeared beneath fresh snow. Then, without a word, Ethan eased the car to a stop. The engine idled, a soft growl swallowed by the wind. What's wrong? I asked. Just stretching our legs, Melissa said. She opened her door, her breath rising in white curls. Come on, Wade, air's clean out here. I stepped out. The cold hit like a slap, pure, honest, unfiltered. Snowflakes hissed against the hood of my coat. The headlights cut 2 weak tunnels into the dark. Ethan circled to the trunk, hands buried in his pockets. Melissa faced me, a faint smile curving her lips. You've done enough, Wade, she said. It's time to let go. The words didn't sound cruel, only final. A soldier knows that tone, the one you use when you've already closed the door in your mind. Ethan avoided my eyes. He brushed past her, slid into the driver's seat, and shut the door. The car rolled forward, slow at first, then faster. I watched the red taillights fade, twin ghosts swallowed by the storm. Silence. No sound, but wind scraping across the road and the low crackle of ice under my boots. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the cold burn its way into my bones. My breath came in white bursts. My heart was calm, too calm. Years in uniform teach you that panic is just wasted oxygen. They left me here, in the cold. Good. You can't control what people do. Only how you respond. I could stand here and curse them, or start walking. A gust of wind cut across my face. I looked down the road, a ribbon of gray disappearing into white. The world was empty, but not hopeless. You walk, even when you're lost, because every step clears the fog. Every breath reminds you you're still alive. I adjusted my gloves, pulled the collar higher around my neck. The farm boy in me remembered how to read the land, the slope of the ditches, the shape of the tree line, the faint smell of water in the air. Somewhere beyond this storm was a town, a phone, a light. Discipline isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the voice that says move. So I did, one step, then another. Snow crunching beneath me like broken glass. The wind pushed and I leaned into it. My body obeyed before my mind caught up. Training never really leaves you. You just change battlefields. I walked toward the storm, toward clarity, toward my target. Behind me, the tire tracks were already vanishing. Ahead, nothing but white and the steady rhythm of my boots. When the numbness reached my fingertips, I smiled. Pain was proof that the machine still worked. Pain was alive. Somewhere, Melissa might be laughing. Ethan might be trying not to think about what they'd done, but the world has its own sense of justice. You don't have to chase it. You just have to be awake when it comes back around. The snow deepened. My breath grew ragged, but I kept walking, eyes fixed on the horizon I couldn't see. Hours would pass before their world began to crack. But for now, there was only the sound of my steps, steady, deliberate, unstoppable, cutting through the storm. The storm broke sometime before dawn. I couldn't tell when. Snow had a way of swallowing sound, bending time until hours felt like a single breath held too long. My legs kept moving long after the rest of me stopped caring why. Then, through the white blur, I saw a faint glow. Headlights cutting through the dark. A pickup truck slowed beside me. The window rolled down and a man leaned out, scarf covering half his face. "Jesus, you trying to die out here?" he shouted over the wind. "Not today," I said. He opened the door. "Get in!" The heat hit me like a punch. My hands ached as the feeling came back. I stared out the window while he drove, the wipers beating a rhythm over the windshield. After a few miles, he said, "You're a long way from anywhere, mister." "Been farther," I answered. He didn't ask more. Men like him recognize another man who doesn't need saving, only direction. He dropped me at a gas station by the state road, where the flag out front was frozen stiff. I thanked him, gave him my last 20 and stepped inside. The clerk poured me coffee, eyes wide. "You okay, sir?" Getting there, I borrowed the phone behind the counter, dialed one number from memory. It rang twice before a voice said, "Samuel Briggs." "Sam, it's Wade." A pause. "Good Lord, the radio said there was a blizzard up your way. Ethan told folks you—" I know what he told them. The silence on the line wasn't confusion. It was calculation. Sam had been my lawyer for 20 years, but more than that, he'd been my friend since the service. He was the kind of man who didn't flinch when duty called. He just reached for a pen instead of a rifle. "You safe?" he asked. "Warm enough. I'll be off the grid for a while," he exhaled. "Then I'll start digging. You still want me to hold the claws?" "Yes," I said. "Hold it quiet." For now, I stayed in a rented cabin outside Albany. The owner didn't ask questions. Cash never invites them. Days blurred into one another. I fixed small things: a leaking pipe, a broken latch, the habit of sleeping too light. The world thought I was gone, and I let it. At night, I listened to the wind and the slow crackle of the stove. Sometimes I thought about Ethan's face in the headlights before they drove away. There hadn't been hate there, just weakness, the kind that hides behind other people's choices. I'd seen that look on recruits who froze when the first shot went off. You can train skill. You can't teach spine. Melissa, though, hers was the steady hand. The kind of ambition that smiles while it cuts. I could almost respect that, if it hadn't worn my son's name. 3 weeks later, Sam came to the cabin. Snow still thick on his boots, he brushed it off before stepping inside. "You look good for a dead man," he said. I poured him coffee. "Dead men don't drink this strong." He sat, unrolling papers from his briefcase. "I went through the deed. You were smart, Wade. That clause you slipped in. Ownership reverts in case of moral breach or proven neglect. It's airtight. I wrote it after Ethan stopped showing up to help with harvest," I said. "Figured if he ever forgot what the land stood for, the land would remember me." Sam nodded slowly. "You always plan 3 steps ahead. You thinking of pulling it now?" "Not yet. Let them feel safe first. Let them hang their pictures, paint over the walls, believe the place is theirs. That's when truth hits hardest." He studied me over the rim of his cup. "You don't want revenge, do you?" I shook my head. "No, revenge is noise. I want silence, the kind that teaches." When he left, I stood at the window, watching the tire tracks vanish under new snow. The world outside was still and white, a clean slate. They believed I'd died out there, frozen in some ditch. And maybe in a way that was true. The man who trusted too easily had frozen to death that night. What came back was something colder, sharper, carved down to purpose. The vengeance wasn't new. It had been written long before the betrayal, inked into a line of small print, buried beneath their signatures, waiting like a loaded rifle behind glass. Now, all it needed was time. The first whisper reached town before the thaw. A neighbor told another, who told the postman, who told the woman running the diner that old Wade Callahan had frozen to death out near the state road. By the time it hit the local paper, it had already turned into a sermon about the dangers of pride and solitude. They printed my picture from a 4th of July parade, me in uniform, hat off, hand over my heart. Underneath, "Local veteran lost in winter storm." Ethan framed the clipping on the mantel. I know because Sam told me. He'd seen it during a friendly visit. The boy even managed tears for the crowd. Melissa held his hand through the eulogy, dry-eyed, already thinking of paint colors for the big house. Grief photographs well when there's profit behind it. Within a week, the first cracks started showing. Melissa called a realtor, smiling that bright smile she used to use on me when she wanted something signed. She talked about downsizing, about fresh starts. But when the realtor pulled the title, she frowned. "There seems to be a problem, Mrs. Callahan. The ownership hasn't fully transferred." "Your father-in-law's name is still listed as co-owner." Melissa laughed it off. "That must be a clerical issue. He passed recently." The woman nodded politely. "Even so, I can't list the property until that's cleared." "You'll need the original owner's signature." Melissa froze for half a heartbeat before recovering. "That won't be possible." "Then," the realtor said, closing her folder, "neither will the sale." By the next morning, Ethan was on the phone with the bank. His voice rose and fell, then broke entirely. Sam had moved quietly through the legal channels just as we'd planned. Every account tied to the farm, business, maintenance, property tax, was locked pending verification of ownership. Ethan's face, red and desperate, flickered across the video feed of the bank's security camera. "I know because Sam sent me a still frame. Looks like they're getting the message," he said over the line. "Good," I answered. "Let them sit in it a while." From the window of my cabin, I could see the valley below, a gray ribbon of road leading toward the farm. I'd drive down some mornings before dawn, park at the edge of the property line, and watch the lights flicker in the big house. Melissa pacing with her phone, Ethan shouting, both of them trapped inside the comfort they'd stolen. They thought the world would move on without consequence. But small towns have long memories. Once the word spread that Ethan and Melissa were selling before my body was even found, the sympathy began to rot. People stopped waving. The diner waitress served their coffee cold. At church, heads turned away. "Too soon," they whispered. "Too slick. Reputation dies slower than flesh, but it dies all the same." I didn't feel joy watching it happen. Just order, like a balance restored. I sat on the hood of my truck some nights, breathing the cold, listening to the silence that replaced their laughter. That silence was mine now. Sam kept me updated. "They filed a complaint," he said one evening, chuckling. "Said there's a mistake on the deed. The county clerk sent them the copy with your clause highlighted in red. Ownership reverts in case of moral breach or proven neglect," I recited. He laughed softly. "Never seen two people read one line so many times trying to make it mean something else." I smiled. It means exactly what it says. The farm's fields lay frozen, the barn doors chained shut by the bank. Ethan took odd jobs in town, hauling lumber, fixing fences for men who'd once worked for me. Melissa stopped showing her face entirely. Rumor had it she drove to the city once a week, maybe looking for a buyer who didn't care about signatures. None ever came back with her. Meanwhile, I waited. The best lessons don't come from punishment, they come from time. Time to hear the echo of your own choices, to realize silence doesn't forgive. It just remembers. So I watched from the ridge as the sun set over the white fields, the same land they'd tried to take. My name was still written on it, on the deed, on the soil, on the wind that rolled across the snow, and they were learning one long empty day at a time that a man may vanish. But his legacy does not. Spring crept back slow that year, hesitant, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. The snow thinned, retreating into the ditches, and the fields began to show stripes of brown beneath the white. I was still up in the cabin most days, working the same routine, black coffee, small repairs, quiet. The radio spoke of planting season, of new beginnings. I smiled at the irony. For some people, spring meant life returning. For Ethan and Melissa, it would mean reckoning. Sam had sent the final papers 2 weeks earlier. Everything was in order, every dotted I, every clause, every signature. The bank had completed its audit. The law was on my side now, not as a weapon, but as truth set free. All that remained was to let the truth find its way home. On a gray morning, the mail truck turned onto the gravel road leading to the farm. Melissa watched from the porch, robe tight around her, coffee gone cold. She'd stopped opening the curtains most days, but habit kept her moving through the motions. The mailman handed her the envelope. Heavy stock paper, government seal. The return address read, Briggs and Callahan Law Offices. Ethan came in from the barn a few minutes later, boots still muddy. "What's that?" he asked. "Something from your father's lawyer," she said, voice flat. He froze. "What would Sam want with us now?" Melissa shrugged, sliding a finger under the flap. One sheet fell out, official letterhead, notarized, stamped. Another, smaller page landed face down on the table. Ethan picked up the document first. His eyes moved down the lines, his lips tightening with every word. He read it again. Then a third time. The color drained from his face. It says the property's reverted." Melissa frowned. "Reverted? That's impossible." He turned the page toward her, finger tracing the clause in red ink. "Ownership reverts in case of moral breach or proven neglect." Her mouth opened, but no sound came. The air seemed to thicken between them. Then Ethan saw the second page, the smaller one, folded once. He opened it, and there it was, my handwriting, firm, precise. "You can't steal what you never earned." He read it aloud, the words scraping his throat like gravel. For a moment, he stood there, shoulders trembling, as if trying to decide whether to laugh or cry. Then the paper slipped from his hand. Melissa whispered, "He's dead." "He has to be dead," Ethan's voice cracked. "Maybe he's not." Up in the hills, I watched the smoke from their chimney twist into the sky. Sam had told me the delivery was complete. "You sure you want to do it this way?" he'd asked. "It's the only way," I'd said. "No shouting, no courtroom, no spectacle. Just truth delivered by mail," he'd smiled. Always the quiet soldier. Back at the farm, Ethan sat at the kitchen table long after Melissa had left the room. He stared at the letter as if it might change if he kept looking. But it didn't. The seal, the clause, the line in my hand, they were all real. He thought of the day they'd left me on the road. The cold wind, the silence that followed. He remembered looking into the mirror and seeing his father standing there one last time, small in the red glow of the taillights. He hadn't looked back since, until now. Outside, the first rain of spring began to fall. It hit the roof in slow, measured taps, like the ticking of a clock running out. Melissa stormed back in. "We can fight this," she said. "We'll hire someone. We'll appeal." Ethan didn't answer. He picked up the letter again, reading that single line until the ink blurred with his tears. "You can't steal what you never earned." It wasn't a threat. It was a sentence, a final one. He rose from the table and went to the window. The fields stretched out before him, bare and silent. His father's land, his father's name still written in the soil. And for the first time since that night, Ethan felt the weight of what he'd done, not the fear of losing the farm, but the understanding that he'd already lost something far greater. Up on the ridge, I folded my binoculars and whispered to the wind. Lesson delivered. Then I turned back toward the truck, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. There was more to be done. The frost came back that winter, sharp as broken glass. It was early, the kind of dawn where the light feels uncertain, pale and thin. The air held that stillness that comes before something changes. Inside the farmhouse, Ethan stirred to the low hum of an engine outside. At first, half asleep, he thought it was a dream, some memory echoing through the walls. But then the sound deepened, a slow, familiar rumble. He rose, bare feet on cold floorboards, and peered through the frosted window. The old truck sat by the gate, the same truck he'd learned to drive in, the same one he'd watched disappear down the hill years ago, its taillights glowing like two dying embers in the snow. For a moment, his mind refused to believe it. The truck couldn't be there. The man couldn't be alive, but the exhaust curled upward, silver and real. The driver's door creaked open. Wade Callahan stepped out. No words, no hurry. Just steady motion. Boots crunching over the frost, jacket zipped to the throat, shoulders square as if time had done nothing but polish him harder. Ethan's heart hammered. "Melissa!" he called, voice breaking, but she didn't answer. She hadn't been answering much lately. He threw on his coat and stumbled to the porch. The gate opened with a groan. Wade stopped a few yards away, the breath leaving his mouth in white puffs. His eyes were calm, not soft, not cruel, just certain. Ethan swallowed. "Dad!" The older man tilted his head, studying him as one might study a storm to decide whether it's worth waiting out. Then slowly Wade spoke. "You left me in the cold once." A pause. "I made sure you'd never do it again." The words weren't angry. They were quiet, almost merciful, the way a verdict sounds when justice has already been decided. Ethan's throat went dry. You were dead." Wade looked past him toward the house. "No, I was resting, waiting for the right season." He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. Ethan recognized the logo on the corner. Briggs and Callahan, attorneys at law. His hand shook as he took it. Wade didn't let go immediately. His grip was steady, iron under skin. "Read it," Wade said. Out loud. Ethan opened it, his breath fogging the paper. Inside was a single page, notarized and stamped. His name had been struck through. The new owner listed below, Wade Callahan. Ethan's voice faltered. "The court—" "Didn't need the court," Wade interrupted softly. "The law was already written. You just didn't read the fine print." The silence stretched between them, heavy but clean. Birds stirred in the trees, shaking the frost from their wings. Ethan's eyes glistened. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." "I know," Wade said. That's what makes it worse. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Wade took a step back, the gravel crunching under his boots. Pack what's yours, he said. Leave the land to the man who earned it. He turned, walking back to the truck with the same deliberate calm he'd had on the day of the signing, the calm that meant the decision was final. Ethan watched as his father climbed into the cab. The old engine groaned once, then settled into its steady rhythm. Wade backed up, paused at the gate, and looked one last time toward the house. Not at the building, not even at Ethan, but at the soil itself. Inside the truck, the heater coughed to life. The wheel felt solid under his hands, the leather worn smooth by years of labor. Wade breathed deep. The air smelled of frost and diesel and home. He didn't need to look back to know Ethan was still standing there, frozen between regret and understanding. Some lessons don't need to be shouted. They just need to be witnessed. As the truck rolled down the drive, the first snowflakes began to fall. Slow, deliberate, familiar. The farm was his again. Not through anger, not through violence, but through patience. The kind of justice only silence can deliver. And for the first time in years, Wade allowed himself the smallest trace of a smile. The house was quiet again. Not empty, just quiet in the right way. The kind of quiet that hums with purpose. After Ethan left, Wade spent days walking the fields, checking fences, oiling hinges that had gone stiff in the cold. Every step felt like reacquainting himself with an old friend. The land hadn't blamed him for leaving. It had simply waited. By spring, he'd opened the gates again, but not to sell. This time, he hung a new sign by the entrance. Callahan Haven, a place to stand. It wasn't a farm anymore, not in the way it used to be. It became something quieter, steadier, a refuge for the kind of men time forgets. Old soldiers, worn hands, hollow eyes. Men who still woke at 500 out of habit, but had nowhere to report. The first one came from a shelter in Syracuse. The next, a neighbor's cousin from downstate. Within months, there were 5 of them, living in the converted barn and the small cabins Wade built from scrap lumber and memory. They worked the fields by day, planting, repairing, splitting wood, and gathered by the fire at night. No one talked much about war. You didn't have to. It was there in the way they stacked tools with precision, in the way they paused before closing a door, in the way they sat with their backs to the wall, but never said why. Wade kept to a routine. Coffee before dawn. Walk the perimeter. Fix what was broken. Teach whoever was willing. Discipline, he told them once, isn't about control. It's about calm. You stay steady when the world tilts. They listened, nodding. A few wrote his words down. He didn't tell stories about his past. The men could see the weight in his eyes. And that was enough. When they asked about the scar on his hand, he just said, "Fences bite if you stop paying attention." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Some lessons worked better without details. In summer, the place came alive. Rows of corn, a vegetable patch, chickens pecking by the barn. Laughter started returning to the wind, low, rough, uncertain at first, then stronger. One of the men, Travis, found an old guitar and played on weekends. Another Hank, who barely spoke, started fixing the tractors for fun. The town, curious at first, began to help. Folks donated supplies, tools, food. The same people who'd once whispered about Wade's lonely death now sent their sons to volunteer on weekends. Redemption had a way of spreading quietly when it was real. One evening, as the sun melted into the hills, a young reporter from the county paper showed up. She'd heard rumors about the veteran who built a sanctuary out of nothing. She asked, "Mr. Callahan, why do you do it?" He looked at her a long time before answering. "Because men forget what standing feels like. This place reminds them. Is it about forgiveness?" she asked. Wade smiled faintly. "No, it's about endurance. Forgiveness belongs to God. Standing, that's on us." She scribbled it down, thanked him, and drove off. The next week, her article ran with a single quote in bold: "Strength isn't in striking back. It's in standing when the world expects you to fall." As the days turned cooler again, Wade watched the men splitting wood outside the barn. They worked steady, methodical, their rhythm matching the heartbeat of the land. He thought of Ethan sometimes, wondered if he was working somewhere, learning what real labor feels like. But he never said his name aloud. Some ghosts you let walk themselves out. At dusk, he walked the rows alone. The soil was rich, dark beneath his boots. The same earth that had once betrayed him now carried the weight of something good. He stopped at the old oak near the fence line, the one that marked where his father had taught him to shoot. Where Ethan once carved his initials into the bark. Wade touched the rough trunk, then whispered, "You stand. That's the lesson." The wind stirred the branches, almost answering. When he turned back toward the farmhouse, the lights from the cabins glowed warm against the night. Inside, someone laughed, a sound full of life, unguarded and whole. Wade smiled, slow and quiet. The land had finally fallen silent again, but it wasn't the silence of loss. It was the silence of peace, the kind that comes when you've said all that needed saying, and the rest can be taught just by how you stand. Snow again. Not the cruel kind this time, the kind that drifts down easy, soft as dust on a shelf that's already been cleaned. The whole valley lay under a white hush, barns and fences outlined like pencil sketches. From the ridge, Wade could see smoke curling from the chimneys, thin and blue against the pale sky. It smelled of pine wood and breakfast, of life continuing. He walked the same road where he'd once been left to freeze. The ruts were gone now, filled by years and snow, but his boots still knew the way. Every step pressed into the same ground that had once felt like a grave. Now it felt like home again. The sounds had changed. Where there had once been only the wind and his own breathing, there were voices, low laughter, the rhythm of hammers, dogs barking in play. A truck door slammed somewhere near the barn. Someone shouted, "Coffee's ready!" And the men answered like a choir of ordinary saints. He stopped by the fence line and rested one hand on the post. The wood was cold, but it didn't bite anymore. Beyond it, he saw the barn taking shape again, new boards gleaming under the pale light. A group of the veterans worked side by side, sleeves rolled, faces flushed from the cold. Travis was playing that old guitar again, something slow and steady. Hank waved without looking up, just a quick motion that said, "I see you, boss." Wade nodded back. He didn't need to speak. The place spoke for him now. He looked down the slope toward the spot where the road curved out of sight, the same curve where his son's car had stopped that night. Snow covered it like forgiveness. No markers, no ghosts. Just the land doing what it always did, covering what hurt, keeping what mattered. For a long moment, Wade stood there, breath curling into the air, watching the light stretch over the hills. The sun was climbing slow, melting frost off the rails, catching on the tools leaning by the fence. And in that golden quiet, he thought, "They left me to die in the snow. But I didn't die. I walked, and in walking, I found my purpose again." He said it softly, more to the wind than to himself, and the words seemed to settle over the farm like a benediction. The laughter behind him grew louder. Someone dropped a hammer and cursed good-naturedly. Another called for help lifting a beam. Wade smiled. The sound of work, honest, patient, human, was the best hymn he'd ever known. He started walking again, slow but sure, boots leaving prints that the sun would soon erase. The farmhouse loomed ahead, warm light glowing through the kitchen window. A flag fluttered by the porch, faded but still proud. Beneath it, the sign read, "Callahan Haven, a place to stand." Wade paused at the gate, looking back one last time. The world was bright now, the sky clean and endless. He could almost hear his father's voice, deep and steady. "You take care of the land, son, and the land will take care of you." He touched the gatepost, gave it a small pat, and then stepped through. As he crossed the yard, the light grew stronger, spilling over him until the snow glittered like glass. The camera would catch him from behind, his figure small against the horizon, shoulders straight, stride unhurried. The farm spread out before him, alive again. The storm had done its work. It had stripped everything bare so that only truth could grow back, and Wade Callahan, soldier, farmer, teacher, walked toward the light of the new day, firm, serene, victorious.